The laboratory lights flickered as Dr. Wren adjusted her scanning equipment for the third time that hour. Something about the ruins on Threshold 9 refused to cooperate with modern technology. The dead planet below her research vessel held secrets that predated every known civilization in the galaxy, and she had spent 2 years trying to unlock just one of them. Her 6 luminous tendrils twitched with frustration. The Luminary people were known throughout the galaxy as patient scholars, but even her tolerance had limits. The artifact sitting on her examination table looked like a simple crystalline sphere, yet it absorbed every scan she directed at it. Perhaps a different frequency, she muttered, her voice creating soft harmonic tones that her species used for communication. Her assistant, a younger luminary named Pax, hummed agreement from across the laboratory. The modification took only moments. Dr. Wren activated the scanner again, this time using a frequency combination that theoretical physics suggested shouldn't exist in nature. The crystal sphere suddenly blazed with light. Both scientists jerked backward, their bioluminescent skin flashing alarm colors of deep purple and orange. The sphere rose from the table, rotating slowly as geometric patterns crawled across its surface. Then it sang. The sound bypassed their audio receptors entirely, resonating directly in their minds. It carried meaning, though not in any language the translation matrix could identify. Dr. Wren understood it anyway, the way one understands a scream or a laugh. Warning. Quarantine. Do not approach. Death lives here, shut it down. Pax's harmonics cracked with fear. Dr. Wren's tendrils flew across the controls, but nothing responded. The sphere's song grew louder, more insistent. The laboratory's communication array activated on its own, commandeered by ancient programming that cared nothing for modern security protocols. The warning broadcast outward on every frequency simultaneously, a scream into the void that would reach across hundreds of light years. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sphere went dark. It dropped to the table with a dull thud. The laboratory fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. What did we just do? Pax whispered. Dr. Wren examined the communication logs, her bioluminescence fading to a sickly gray. We just transmitted that signal to approximately 40,000 systems. Every major civilization within 500 light years received it. Will they understand it's a warning? That we made a mistake? Before Dr. Wren could answer, their vessel's proximity alarms shrieked. 6 ships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. The configuration matched no friendly species. The communication channel crackled to life. The voice that emerged spoke in harsh, guttural tones. Luminary vessel, you will not move. You will not transmit. You have activated precursor technology. This is Scarvan territory. You are now prisoners of the Dominion. Dr. Wren's tendrils went rigid with terror. The Scarvan Dominion had a reputation that made even the most warlike species nervous. They conquered. They enslaved. They showed mercy only when it served their interests. This is a research vessel, Dr. Wren transmitted back, trying to keep her harmonics steady. We are unarmed. We activated the artifact by accident. We mean no challenge to anyone's territory. Your intentions are irrelevant. The precursor beacon belongs to the Dominion. You will tell us everything you learned from it, and you will surrender all research data immediately. Comply or your ship will be destroyed. Pax looked at Dr. Wren with all the terror their species could express. What do we do? We comply, Dr. Wren said quietly, and we pray they show mercy. But the Scarvans showed no mercy. Within hours, they had seized Dr. Wren's research vessel and towed it back to Ethros 4, the Luminary homeworld. Within days, the Scarvan fleet had established a blockade around the entire planet. War Chief Draxus himself arrived to oversee the occupation, his flagship a massive wedge of dark metal that blotted out the stars. The Luminary Council convened an emergency session. Their civilization had never fought a war. They had no warships, no weapons, no soldiers. Their orbital stations had shields designed to stop micrometeors, not military-grade plasma cannons. They sent desperate messages to neighboring species begging for protection or intervention. Every request was denied. The Scarvan Dominion was too powerful, too cruel. No one wanted to risk their wrath over a species of scholars who had nothing to offer in return. Dr. Wren sat in a detention cell aboard Draxus's flagship, watching through the viewport as more Scarvan vessels arrived each day. They were building up for something. An invasion? Complete subjugation? She didn't know. but she understood that her people's peaceful existence was over. The artifact, that cursed crystal sphere, sat in a Scarvan laboratory somewhere on this ship. Their scientists were trying to extract its secrets, trying to find the other precursor beacons it had referenced. They believed the precursors had created weapons, super weapons that could destroy entire systems. Dr. Wren knew they were wrong. The warning had been clear to her in that moment of contact. The precursors hadn't built weapons. They'd built warnings. They'd tried to protect the galaxy from something, but no one was listening. And now her people would pay the price for her curiosity, unless Dr. Wren's tendrils moved carefully, checking if her captors were watching. They weren't. The Scarvan considered her people too weak to be dangerous. She pulled a small quantum communicator from a hidden pocket in her research coat. It was technically illegal, able to punch through jamming and communicate across vast distances instantly. She activated the device and began programming a message, not to the neighboring systems who had abandoned them, not to the Council who could do nothing. She programmed the message to transmit on the same spectrum the precursor beacon had used, the one that had reached 40,000 systems. Her message was simple: coordinates, a description of the Scarvan blockade, and 3 words that she hoped someone, somewhere, would understand and answer. Please help us. She sent the message and destroyed the communicator. The Scarvan would detect the transmission eventually, but by then it wouldn't matter. Either someone would answer or her people were doomed anyway. Far away in a star system the Luminari had marked as uninhabited and uninteresting, something received her call. A species that had clawed its way up from a world that tried to kill it every single day. A species that had learned violence not as a choice but as a requirement for survival. Humanity had just learned that they weren't alone in the universe, and humanity had just learned that someone needed help. The Terran Defense Council met within the hour. The debate was brief. The vote was unanimous. 3 ships prepared to depart. Their destination, Ethros 4. Their mission, answer the distress call. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you called for help from a Deathworld. War Chief Draxus stood before the massive viewscreen in his command chamber, watching the pitiful planet below. Ethros 4 glowed with soft blue and green lights, cities built with aesthetic beauty rather than defensive logic. The Luminari were scholars and artists. They would break easily. Status of the fleet? He growled at his tactical officer. 42 vessels now in position, War Chief. The blockade is absolute. Nothing enters or leaves this system without our permission. Draxus bared his fangs in what his species considered a smile. Excellent. Send word to the Council of these lightworms. They have 1 planetary rotation to surrender Dr. Wren's research and every piece of data on the precursor beacon. If they refuse, we begin bombardment with their largest population center. The ultimatum was transmitted. Draxus expected immediate compliance. The Luminari had no military, no way to resist. This would be over before it began. But then his sensor officer made a sound of confusion. War Chief, we have 3 unidentified vessels emerging from FTL at the system's edge. 3 ships? Draxus laughed. Did some neighboring species finally grow courage? Identify them. The sensor officer worked his console frantically. Negative identification. They match no known configuration in our database. Mass suggests frigate-class vessels, but their energy signatures are unusual. They're accelerating toward our position at... That can't be correct. What can't be correct? They're pulling acceleration that would require 15 gravities of force. No known species can survive that. Draxus felt the first whisper of unease. Hail them. Demand identification. The communication channel opened, but the response was not what anyone expected. Instead of words, the 3 unknown vessels simply locked weapons and fired. The tactical display erupted with warnings. Incoming projectiles. They're using kinetic weapons. Impact in 30 seconds. Kinetic weapons! Draxus almost laughed. Primitive, barbaric, easily stopped by modern shield technology. Except the projectiles were moving at significant fractions of light speed, and there were hundreds of them. Shields will absorb them, his tactical officer said confidently. The first railgun slugs hit Scarvan shields and punched straight through them. The shields were designed to disperse energy weapons, to spread the heat and force across their entire surface. But solid matter moving at relativistic speeds followed different physics. The slugs carried so much kinetic energy that they might as well have been antimatter. 3 Scarvan destroyers simply ceased to exist. torn apart by impacts that released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. "Return fire," Draxus roared. "All vessels engage targets." The Scarvan fleet turned its weapons on the 3 small ships. Plasma cannons and particle beams lanced through space, enough firepower to sterilize a continent. The unknown vessels scattered, their movements impossibly agile. A Scarvan cruiser commander reported, "They're pulling over 20 gravities. How are they not dead? Concentrate fire. They can't dodge forever." But the 3 ships weren't trying to dodge everything. Their shields, when hit, flared with an odd quality. The Scarvan weapons were damaging them, but not as quickly as they should. Then Draxus understood. These unknowns had layered their defenses. Energy shields backed by physical armor backed by internal compartmentalization. Primitive in concept, devastating in practice. One of the unknown ships took a direct hit from a heavy plasma cannon. A section of its hull glowed white-hot and sloughed away. But the ship kept fighting, kept firing its barbaric kinetic weapons, kept moving with impossible speed. "They should be crippled," his tactical officer shouted. "That hit would have disabled any of our vessels." The damaged ship rotated, presenting an undamaged side to the Scarvan fleet while its damaged section vented atmosphere and molten metal. Draxus realized with growing horror that the vessel had been built with redundant systems. Losing one section didn't cripple it. What species designed ships like this? What kind of warfare had they experienced to develop such brutal efficiency? Then the 3 ships did something unprecedented. They launched smaller craft. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. Automated attack drones that swarmed like insects, each carrying its own weapons. The Scarvan point defense systems tried to target them all, but there were too many, moving too unpredictably. Drones latched onto Scarvan hulls and detonated. Others fired small railguns at point-blank range, punching through armor to destroy critical systems. 2 more Scarvan destroyers went dark, their power cores breached. "Pull back," Draxus ordered. "Regroup at the outer marker." The Scarvan fleet began to withdraw, but the unknown vessels pursued. They weren't seeking negotiation. They weren't posturing. They were hunting. A frigate exploded as concentrated railgun fire found its reactor. A cruiser tumbled out of formation, life support failing. The Scarvan fleet, 42 strong, was being torn apart by 3 ships. "We've lost 15 vessels," his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. 14 more have major damage." "War Chief, we need to retreat." Draxus wanted to refuse. His honor demanded he destroy these insects who dared challenge the Dominion, but his survival instinct was stronger. "Full withdrawal. Leave the system." As the Scarvan fleet limped away, one of the unknown vessels broke pursuit and approached Ethros IV. A communication channel opened. The voice that emerged spoke in accented but understandable galactic standard. "Luminary vessels, this is Captain Reed of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress call. The Scarvan blockade has been broken. We're here to ensure your safety." On the surface of Ethros IV, Dr. Wren watched the orbital battle through public broadcasts. Her bioluminescence had gone completely white with shock. The Luminary Council convened emergency sessions. Everyone had the same questions. Who were these Terrans? Where had they come from? And why were they so frighteningly effective at violence? Captain Reed's ship, designated TDF Prometheus, established orbit around Ethros IV. A shuttle launched, carrying the captain and a small team to meet with Luminary leadership. When Dr. Wren first saw Captain Reed in person, she understood. His species was shorter than Luminary, but far more dense, compact muscle visible even through his uniform. Eyes positioned forward on his face, predator's eyes that tracked movement with unsettling focus. His skin tone suggested a species adapted to significant solar radiation. "Dr. Wren," Reed said, offering a hand in what her database suggested was a human greeting. She touched it carefully with one tendril. His grip was gentle, but she could feel the strength in it. "Your message reached Earth. We couldn't ignore a distress call." Earth? The name meant nothing to her. Our homeworld. It's far from here in an unregarded system. Most of the galaxy doesn't know we exist yet. We only developed faster than light travel 8 months ago. But your ships, your weapons. You fought the Scarvan like experienced warriors. Reed's expression changed in a way she couldn't interpret. His species' facial communication was complex. "We've been fighting each other for thousands of years, Doctor. We only recently achieved peace among ourselves. The technology might be new, but war isn't." A member of the Luminary Council spoke up, her harmonics trembling. Captain Reed, we are grateful for your intervention, but the Scarven will return with more ships. We have no way to defend ourselves. What happens when you leave? Reed looked at the council, his predator eyes scanning each member. We're not leaving. Not until this situation is resolved. The Scarven wanted something from you. We need to understand what, and we need to make sure they can't take it by force. They want the precursor beacon, Dr. Wren explained. They believe it will lead them to ancient weapons. Then we need to secure it. And we need to prepare for the Scarven to return in force. Reed turned to his team. Get me a tactical assessment of this system's defensive capabilities. Contact Earth. Tell them we need the Second Fleet. One of his officers, a female human with dark skin and calculating eyes, asked the question Dr. Wren was thinking. Sir, what if the Scarven bring their full armada? Reed's expression became something that made Dr. Wren's bioluminescence flicker with instinctive fear. It might have been a smile. Then we'll teach them why picking a fight with a species from a death world is a really bad idea. Ambassador Lith of the Quellan Assembly stood before the Galactic Council, with all 4 of her primary appendages trembling. The emergency session had been called within hours of the incident at Ethros IV, and the chamber buzzed with confused chatter from representatives of over 100 species. Order, the council arbiter called, his deep voice cutting through the noise. Ambassador Lith, you have requested this emergency session. State your concern. Lith's mandibles clicked nervously. Honored Council 3 days ago, an unknown species intervened in the Scarven blockade of Ethros IV. They engaged 42 Scarven warships with only 3 vessels. They destroyed or disabled 15 ships in less than 30 minutes. The Scarven fled. Silence fell over the chamber. Then chaos erupted. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding details, questioning the report's accuracy. Impossible, a Vraxian delegate called out. The Scarven Dominion has the 3rd largest fleet in known space. No one challenges them with 3 ships. I have verified the reports, Lith insisted. Multiple independent sources confirm the engagement. The Scarven themselves have acknowledged the defeat, though they claim it was a tactical withdrawal. Who are these unknown vessels? The arbiter demanded. They call themselves humans. They claim to originate from a world called Earth in the Sol system, Sector 47. The system is listed in our databases as uninhabited. A Pelthrian scholar, ancient and respected, accessed his data tablet. I have the file. The system was surveyed 600 years ago. The 3rd planet showed signs of primitive life, but the survey team classified it as unsuitable for colonization. The report lists it as a Category 12 Deathworld. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence carried weight. Deathworlds were rare in galactic civilization. Most species evolved on stable, gentle worlds. Deathworlds produced either extinction or something dangerous. What is a Category 12? A younger delegate asked. The Pelthrian scholar's voice carried the weight of terrible understanding. The highest classification: extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere to most species, rampant with predatory life, geological instability, harsh climate variations. Category 12 worlds don't produce civilizations. They produce survivors. Lith continued her report. I have obtained sensor data from the engagement. With your permission, I will display it. The central holographic projector activated, showing the Scarven fleet in formation. Then 3 human ships appeared, tiny by comparison. The engagement began. The council watched in growing horror as the battle unfolded. The human vessels moved with acceleration that should have liquefied their crews. They used weapons that the more civilized species had abandoned centuries ago as too crude. When damaged, they kept fighting with a determination that seemed irrational. They're not retreating, a delegate whispered. Even damaged, they're not retreating. Deathworld psychology, the Pelthrian scholar explained. Species from harsh worlds don't retreat unless tactically necessary. They can't. On their homeworlds, retreat often meant death. The hologram showed the drones launching, swarming, detonating against Scarven hulls. A Quellan military observer made a sound of distress. They're using automated weapons. That's forbidden by the Treaty of Civilized Warfare. They never signed the treaty, Lyth pointed out. They only achieved faster-than-light travel 8 months ago. They know nothing of our laws. The arbiter studied the holographic battle with narrowed eyes. What do we know about human physiology? Lyth pulled up another display. The assembled council looked at the human biological data with varying degrees of shock. They evolved from persistence predators, Lith explained. They literally hunted prey by chasing it until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their homeworld's gravity is 3 times galactic standard. Their atmosphere contains free oxygen at concentrations we would consider toxic. They have redundant organs, including 2 of several major systems. Their skeletal structure can withstand impacts that would shatter most species. A medical officer from the Luminary delegation added, "We've examined the human team on Ethros 4. They consume water and food that would poison 60% of known species. Their body temperature would cause heat damage to many of us. They heal from injuries at rates we've only seen in engineered species." "How did such a species develop civilization?" a delegate asked. "Deathworlds usually produce savage, warlike cultures that destroy themselves." "They did," Lith said quietly. "Their history is filled with warfare. Thousands of conflicts, some lasting decades. They developed nuclear weapons before space travel and came close to extinction multiple times. But approximately 70 years ago, they achieved global peace. They've maintained it since." "So they know war," the Arbiter said, "but they've chosen peace." "Among themselves," Lith corrected. "But they haven't forgotten how to fight. And when they received the Luminary distress call, they chose to respond." A Vraxian military advisor spoke up. "This is a threat to galactic stability, a species from a death world, armed with primitive but effective weapons with no respect for our treaties or customs. We should contain them immediately." "With what?" Lith challenged. 3 of their ships defeated 15 Scarvan vessels. "We have no military capacity comparable to the Scarvan Dominion. We have no military capacity at all. We haven't needed it for 3,000 years." The truth hung in the chamber like a weight. Galactic civilization had become comfortable, peaceful, safe. They'd forgotten that the universe could still produce predators. "We need more information," the Arbiter decided. "Lith, you will travel to Ethroster 4 as our representative. Establish contact with these humans. Learn their intentions. Report back." Far away on Ethroster, Captain Reed studied holographic displays of the Scarvan fleet positions. His tactical officer had news. "Sir, long-range sensors detect Scarvan reinforcements. 300 vessels converging on this location. Estimated arrival in 6 days." Reed didn't look surprised. "Expected. What's the status of our reinforcements?" "Second Fleet will arrive in 4 days. 30 ships plus support craft. Also, Earth Command is sending the 5th Marine Division." "Marines?" Dr. Wren asked. She'd been present for the tactical briefing, trying to understand how humans plan to defend her world. "What are Marines?" Reed turned to her, and she saw something in his expression that might have been apologetic. "Ground forces. Soldiers trained for boarding actions and planetary assault. But modern warfare is conducted in orbit. No one fights on surfaces anymore. Humans do," Reed said simply. "When we want to take something, we put boots on the ground. When we want to hold something, we dig in. The Scarvan are used to opponents who retreat when faced with overwhelming force. We're going to teach them a different kind of warfare." One of Reed's junior officers, a young human named Lou, spoke up hesitantly. "Captain, what if the Council demands we withdraw? Technically, we're violating their territory by being here without permission." Reed looked at the holographic image of Ethros 4, peaceful and vulnerable. "Then I guess I'll have to apologize to Earth Command after we've finished protecting people who need protection. We don't abandon allies, not even allies we just met." Dr. Wren felt something shift in her understanding. These humans were dangerous, yes. Their capacity for violence was terrifying. But they'd crossed hundreds of light years to answer a distress call from strangers. They were risking war with the Scarvan Dominion for a species they'd never met. Maybe Deathworlds didn't just produce predators. Maybe they also produced protectors. The communication system chimed. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from an Ambassador Lith of the Galactic Council. She's requesting permission to meet with you." Reed nodded. "Grant it. Let's see what the galaxy's governments have to say about this situation." On the Scarvan flagship, War Chief Draxus received his orders directly from the High Command. The Armada was mobilizing. 300 ships would converge on Ethros 4. These humans would be crushed, their vessels torn apart, their homeworld marked for subjugation. Draxus studied the battle data from his previous engagement, watching the human ships move, fire, adapt. A small voice in his mind whispered that perhaps his superiors were underestimating these newcomers. But orders were orders. The Dominion did not tolerate defeat. The humans would learn that there were consequences for opposing Scarvan authority. The Armada began its journey. In 6 days, the galaxy would witness the largest military engagement in 3,000 years. Neither side knew yet that this battle would change everything, that it would expose how fragile galactic peace truly was, and that it would awaken something far worse than either the Scarvan or humanity could imagine. Ambassador Lith had seen many species in her diplomatic career, but nothing prepared her for standing in the same room as 5 humans. They radiated physicality in a way that made her instinctively step back. Captain Reed noticed and gestured to chairs designed for luminary physiology. "Please, Ambassador, we don't bite." He paused. "Well, we can, but we won't." The human attempt at humor did little to calm her nerves. She settled into a chair, grateful for the barrier it provided. "Captain Reed, I represent the Galactic Council. We have concerns about your presence here." "I imagine you do." Reed remained standing, a dominance display that might not be intentional but was effective nonetheless. "Let me guess. You want us to leave before the Scarvan return in force. The Council believes your intervention, while perhaps well-intentioned, has escalated the situation. The Scarvan will not forgive this humiliation." "Good." Reed's expression hardened. "They shouldn't forgive it. They blockaded a peaceful world and threatened to bombard cities. Where was the Council then?" Lith's mandibles clicked with discomfort. "The Council observes non-interference in bilateral disputes." "You mean you were too scared to help?" Reed leaned forward. "Ambassador, let me be direct. We received a distress call. We responded. We're not leaving until the Luminari are safe. If that bothers the Council, they're welcome to file a complaint. You don't understand galactic politics. The Scarvan Dominion has significant influence. If you continue this confrontation, you'll make enemies across multiple sectors. We'll make enemies defending people who can't defend themselves." Reed shook his head. "Then I guess we're okay with having enemies." Before Lith could respond, alarms shrieked through the station. A human officer rushed in. "Captain, the Second Fleet just dropped out of FTL and you need to see this." They moved to the operations center where holographic displays showed the new arrivals. 30 human warships larger than the initial 3, spread into defensive formations around Ethros 4. But it was the troop carriers that made Lith's blood run cold. "What are those vessels?" she asked. "Marine assault ships," Reed explained. "Each one carries 1,000 soldiers with full combat equipment." "You're bringing ground forces?" Why, Reed pulled up tactical data. "Because the Scarvan think overwhelming numbers will win this fight. We're going to show them that numbers don't matter if you can't effectively use them." The Marine ships began deploying orbital defense platforms, automated weapons satellites, and sensor nets. They worked with military precision that spoke of countless drills and real combat experience. Admiral Torres, commander of the Second Fleet, appeared via holographic communication. She was older than Reed, her face marked with scars. "Captain status?" "Scarvan Armada inbound. 300 vessels. Arrival in 57 hours. Torres nodded calmly. "We've fought worse odds. Have the Luminari agreed to evacuate key personnel?" "They're refusing. This is their homeworld." "Brave." Torres actually smiled. "We'll work with that." Beginning defensive preparations. Torres out. Lith watched the humans organize with growing dread. They weren't preparing to retreat or negotiate. They were preparing for war. "Captain, 300 ships against 33. The mathematics are simple." "Mathematics isn't warfare," Reed countered. "We have defensive positions, prepared ground, and home field advantage. The Scarvan will have to come to us." Over the next 2 days, Lith watched in fascination and horror as the human fleet transformed the Ethros system into a fortress. They laid minefields using primitive explosive devices that no modern military even considered. They positioned railgun platforms at key orbital points. They landed Marines on Ethros 4 itself, digging defensive positions around critical infrastructure. Dr. Wren showed Lith the Marine encampment. Human soldiers in powered armor moved equipment that should have required heavy machinery. They worked in the reduced gravity without complaint, though Lith knew from her research that Ethros 4's gravity must feel uncomfortably light to them. "They're so young," Dr. Wren observed. Many of the Marines appeared barely adult by human standards. A Marine sergeant, a woman named Rivers, overheard. "Young enough to heal fast, old enough to know what we're fighting for, Doctor." "And what are you fighting for?" Lith asked. "This isn't your world." Rivers adjusted the massive weapon she carried with casual ease. "No, ma'am. But it's somebody's world. People live here. Got families, kids, lives. The Scarven want to take that away, so we're here to make sure they can't. The simple conviction in her voice shook Lith more than the weapons or armor. These humans truly believed in what they were doing. The Scarven Armada arrived ahead of schedule, eager for battle. War Chief Draxus commanded from his flagship, surrounded by 300 vessels in a formation designed to maximize firepower. All ships advance. Destroy the human fleet, then occupy Ethos 4, show no mercy. The Armada moved forward, weapons charging. Then the first ships hit the minefields. Nuclear devices detonated in precisely calculated patterns. Not enough to destroy the heavy Scarven cruisers, but enough to break their formations, scramble sensors, and force evasive maneuvers. The Armada's perfect attack formation dissolved into chaos. Human railgun platforms opened fire from multiple angles. The Scarven had expected a frontal engagement. Instead, they found themselves in a killing field with threats from every direction. Return fire, Draxus roared. All vessels engage targets of opportunity. The Scarven fleet responded with overwhelming firepower. Several human defense platforms vanished in plasma fire. But for every platform destroyed, the humans had backup systems. Redundancy upon redundancy. Then Admiral Torres gave an order that made no sense to Draxus. All ships advance. Get in close. The human fleet accelerated directly toward the Scarven Armada. Suicidal. Insane. Except the human ships were smaller, more maneuverable, and their crews could withstand acceleration that would kill most species. They got inside the Scarven formation before the larger vessels could effectively target them. Human ships dueled with Scarven cruisers at point-blank range, their kinetic weapons chewing through armor. Boarding pods launched from human assault ships, "They're boarding us." A Scarven captain screamed over the communication net. "They're actually boarding our ships." Draxus watched in disbelief as the humans did the impossible. They were fighting a fleet action and a boarding action simultaneously. It was archaic, brutal, and devastatingly effective. Inside the Scarven flagship, Marines in powered armor ripped through corridors. The Scarven soldiers, bred for aggression and strength, discovered that the humans in their armored suits were stronger. Human weapons, designed to operate in any environment, functioned flawlessly where Scarven equipment struggled. A Marine squad breached Draxus's command center. The war chief drew his ceremonial blade, ready to die with honor. The lead Marine, identified as Sergeant Rivers, raised her weapon but didn't fire. "War Chief Draxus," she said through her helmet's external speakers, "you can surrender your fleet and save lives, or we can do this the hard way." Draxus looked at his dead guards, his shattered command station, the human soldiers who had torn through his flagship like it was made of paper. He had been bred for war, raised for combat, trained to never surrender, but he had also been taught to recognize when a fight was lost. "I surrender," he said, dropping his blade. "I surrender the fleet." In orbit, the Scarven Armada received the order. Some captains refused, continuing to fight until their ships were disabled. Others, seeing their war chief's wisdom, stood down. The battle ended with 73 Scarven vessels destroyed or crippled, 59 captured or surrendered, and the rest fleeing the system. The human fleet had lost 12 ships with 9 more heavily damaged. Ambassador Lith watched the aftermath from the Luminary orbital station, her mind struggling to process what she'd witnessed. The humans had been outnumbered 10-1. They should have been destroyed. Instead, they'd won. Captain Reed found her in the observation lounge looking at the debris field. "Ambassador, you wanted to understand human intentions. Now you know. We protect those who can't protect themselves, even if it means fighting a war we're not prepared for." "Your casualties," Lith whispered. 2,000 humans died today." "I know." Pain flickered across Reed's face. "I know every name. We'll honor them. But they died doing what they believed was right. The Scarven won't forgive this. The Dominion will send more fleets. Let them." Reed looked at Ethos 4, peaceful and blue below. "The galaxy needs to learn that aggression has consequences, that there are people willing to stand against bullies." Lith felt her perception of the universe shift. For 3,000 years, the galaxy had enjoyed peace through fear and non-intervention. The strong did what they wanted because no one could stop them. Until now. "What happens next?" she asked. "Next, we teach anyone who wants to learn how to defend themselves. The age of running from bullies is over, Ambassador. The age of standing up to them has begun. Far away, in the dead zones at the galaxy's edge, Ancient sensors registered the massive energy releases from the battle at Ethros IV. Quantum processes that had slept for millions of years began to wake. The Devourers stirred. The meeting chamber on the reconstructed Galactic Council station held twice as many delegates as usual. Every major species had sent representatives after witnessing the Battle of Ethros IV. The holographic footage had spread throughout known space. Watched billions of times, Ambassador Lith stood at the central podium, Admiral Torres beside her. Behind them, projected large enough for everyone to see, hung images of the battle's aftermath. 3,000 years, the Council Arbiter began. 3,000 years of peace. 3,000 years without major warfare. And in one day everything changed. A Vraxian military observer stood. Admiral Torres, you brought overwhelming force against the Scarvan. Your tactics were brutal and efficient. You boarded ships with ground troops. You used automated weapons. You ignored every treaty we've established about civilized warfare. Torres met his gaze steadily. We never signed your treaties. And when someone threatens to bombard civilian populations, civilized warfare becomes meaningless. We fought to win. We fought to protect innocence. If that makes us barbaric in your eyes, so be it. But at what cost? A Pelthrian scholar interjected. Your casualties were significant. 2,000 dead. How is that victory? Because 5 million Luminari are still alive, Torres said quietly. Because Ethros IV wasn't reduced to ash. Because the Scarvan learned they can't threaten peaceful species without consequences. Yes, we paid a price. Freedom and safety always come with a price. Lith stepped forward. Honored Council, we need to discuss the greater issue here. The humans have exposed a weakness we've ignored for millennia. We have no military capacity. None. We've survived through diplomacy and the assumption that everyone wants peace. Peace is our greatest achievement, a delegate protested. Peace built on helplessness isn't peace, Torres countered. It's just waiting to be victims. The Scarvan blockaded the Luminari because they knew no one would stop them. How many other species are vulnerable to the same threat? The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to admit the truth, but everyone knew it. The galaxy's peace was fragile, maintained by mutual weakness rather than mutual strength. Then Dr. Wren entered the chamber, requesting permission to speak. The Arbiter granted it, curious to hear from the scientist whose distress call had started everything. Honored delegates, Dr. Wren began, her bioluminescence pulsing with nervous energy. I need to share what I've learned about the precursor beacon. The humans helped me fully decode it. She activated a holographic display showing the crystal sphere and its internal structure. The precursors weren't warlike. They were scientists, explorers, peaceful like us. But they encountered something that forced them to become warriors. They called it the Devourer. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The name stirred ancient racial memories, legends dismissed as mythology. The Devourers were a hive intelligence, a species that consumed everything they touched. The precursors fought them for 1,000 years. Eventually the precursors won, but at terrible cost. They scattered warning beacons across the galaxy, marking quarantine zones where the Devourers were sealed away. That's legend, a delegate scoffed. Stories to frighten younglings. Dr. Wren's bioluminescence flashed deep crimson, a luminary expression of serious warning. The Scarvan were searching for those quarantine zones, looking for precursor weapons. When they probed the sealed areas, they may have awakened something. Admiral Torres pulled up new sensor data. 2 days ago, our long-range monitoring detected unusual activity in Sector 9, one of the areas marked on the precursor map. Energy signatures consistent with massive biological activity, movement on a scale we've never seen. The hologram shifted, showing deep space. Dark shapes moved there, thousands of them. They weren't ships in any traditional sense. They were alive. The Devourers are returning, Dr. Wren said. And we have no way to stop them. Panic erupted in the chamber. Delegates shouted questions, demands, accusations. The Arbiter called for order repeatedly before the chaos finally subsided. If what you say is true, the Arbiter said carefully, then we face extinction. The Council has no military. Our civilization isn't built for war. Then we'll teach you, Torres said. That's why we're here. Not just to fight the Devourers, but to help you learn to fight. To help you build defenses, train soldiers, develop weapons. You've forgotten how to protect yourselves. We never did. You would help us? Lith asked. Even after the Council questioned your methods. Help you fight extinction? Of course. Torres smiled grimly. Because if the Devourers are as bad as the Precursor's records suggest, we can't fight them alone. No one can. This requires every species working together. But we have no experience with warfare, a Quellan delegate protested. We've spent millennia removing violence from our cultures. We don't have soldiers. Then we start training them now, Torres replied. My Marines can teach basic combat. Earth Command is sending military advisors for each species. We'll share our weapons technology, our tactics, our experience. But you need to commit. You need to be willing to fight for survival. The Arbiter looked around the chamber at the frightened delegates. This council was formed to maintain peace. Now we must learn war. Admiral Torres, what do you need from us? Everything. Ships, resources, volunteers willing to become soldiers. And most importantly, time. We need to fortify key systems, establish supply lines, and train forces before the Devourers reach populated space. How much time do we have? The Arbiter asked. Torres checked her tactical display. Best estimate? 6 months before they reach the first major population centers. A year before they threaten core systems. If we're lucky, and if we're unlucky, then we fight with whatever we have and hope it's enough. Over the following weeks, the galaxy transformed. Human military advisors spread across 100 worlds, teaching species that had never held weapons how to defend themselves. Engineers from Earth shared designs for railguns, missile systems, armored vehicles. Shipyards that had built pleasure craft began constructing warships. On Ethros 4, Dr. Wren watched Luminary volunteers undergo basic training with human Marines. They were clumsy, frightened, but determined. Her assistant Pax was among them, learning to use weapons that seemed impossibly heavy in his delicate tendrils. Will we really be able to fight? Pax asked her during a break in training. Dr. Wren watched Sergeant Rivers demonstrating combat maneuvers with patient efficiency. The humans believe we can. They've seen species evolve from prey to predators. They think we can do the same. But we're scholars, Doctor. Artists and scientists. We're not built for war. Neither were the Precursors, Dr. Wren said softly. But when survival demanded it, they adapted. We'll do the same. In Earth's orbit, the Terran Defense Council convened an emergency session. Fleet Admiral Hayes addressed the assembled military leadership and civilian government. The galaxy is looking to us for leadership in this war. They're calling us the Deathworlders now, seeing us as their best hope against the Devourers. But I need to be clear about our situation. He pulled up strategic maps showing the galaxy's spiral arms. We're overextended. We have 37 battle groups spread across 200 systems, training forces and establishing defenses. The Devourers are emerging in multiple locations simultaneously. This isn't going to be one battle. It's going to be a war of attrition. Can we win? A council member asked. Hayes looked at the maps, at the vast distances and massive forces involved. If the other species learn fast enough, if we can establish a coordinated defense, if the Devourers are still weakened from their ancient hibernation, then maybe, but it's going to cost us how much? Everything we're willing to give, and probably more. Deep in Sector 9, the first Devourer swarms reached a populated system. The colony world of New Haven had 2 million inhabitants, mostly Pelthrian miners and their families. They had no military, no defenses beyond basic shields. The Devourers fell on them like locusts, bioships that ate through hull metal, organisms that consumed atmosphere and organic matter. Within 8 hours, New Haven was silent. The distress calls reached the Galactic Council and Human Command simultaneously. Admiral Torres watched the last transmissions, her face carved from stone. Get me the 4th Fleet, she ordered. And contact Captain Reed. Tell him we're out of time. The war has begun. On Ethros 4, Reed received the message. He looked at Dr. Wren, at the Luminary volunteers still training, at the incomplete defenses. How long until we're ready? Dr. Wren asked. We'll never be ready, Reed said honestly. But we're out of time to prepare. Now we just have to survive. The galaxy held its breath. The peaceful civilization that had forgotten war now had to remember. The Deathworlders from Earth stood at the front lines, ready to teach a terrible lesson. Sometimes peace must be defended with violence. Sometimes survival requires becoming what you feared. The age of innocence was over. The age of the Devourer had begun. The Threshold Nebula stretched across space like a luminous scar, its gases and stellar debris forming a natural choke point between the galactic core and outer rim. Admiral Torres studied the tactical display with the grim understanding that this position would determine everything. If the Devourers get past us here, she told her assembled fleet commanders, they have direct access to 40 populated systems. We hold this line or we condemn billions to death. The first battle group had established defensive positions throughout the nebula. Minefields threaded through the densest gas clouds, railgun platforms positioned at strategic coordinates, human ships interspersed with vessels from 12 other species, all trained in the past 6 months by marine advisors. The Luminary contingent held the southern flank, their bioluminescent ships moving with careful precision. Dr. Wren commanded one of them, her scientific mind adapted to tactical thinking. She never imagined her distress call would lead to this moment, leading her people into war. All ships status check, Torres ordered. Responses came back from across the fleet. Humans, Luminari, Quellans, Vraxians, Pelthrians, species that had never fought together, now unified by necessity. 200 vessels total, facing an enemy they barely understood. The Devourers arrived like nightmares given form. Sensor readings detected them first. Thousands of biological signatures moving through space without ships, without technology. Just raw evolved hunger. Visual confirmation, the sensor officer reported. The main display showed them. Creatures ranging from small fighter-sized organisms to capital ship-sized behemoths. They moved with fluid grace, perfectly coordinated by their hive intelligence. Their bodies were adapted for space, for combat, for consumption. Fleet engagement range in 5 minutes, Torres stated calmly. All batteries prepare to fire. Remember your training. Aim for the larger organisms first. They coordinate the smaller ones. Dr. Wren watched the approaching swarm with analytical detachment that helped control her terror. The Devourers vastly outnumbered the defense fleet. But numbers weren't everything. The humans had taught them that. Luminary group, she transmitted to her squadron. Light pattern Delta. Let them see us. The luminary ships pulsed with coordinated bioluminescence, bright enough to be visible across vast distances. The Devourers, attracted to energy signatures, shifted their approach vector toward the light show. Right into the prepared killing field. Now, Torres ordered. The nebula erupted with weapons fire. Railguns sent streams of kinetic projectiles through space, missiles with chemical warheads designed to burn even in vacuum. Energy weapons that human engineers had modified based on precursor technology. The first wave of Devourers died in the maelstrom, but they learned fast. The survivors adapted their formations, using destroyed organisms as shields. They closed the distance rapidly, faster than projections suggested. Brace for close engagement, Torres warned. All ships, defensive pattern Omega. The fleet formations shifted. Human vessels moved to the front, their crews able to withstand the extreme maneuvers necessary for close combat. The other species' ships provided support fire while maintaining safer positions. Devourers crashed into the human line. They latched onto hulls, their organic acids eating through armor. They fired organic projectiles that exploded on contact with shields. They were weapons evolved for a war the precursors had barely survived. But the humans were weapons evolved for surviving Earth. Marines, you're up, Torres said. Airlocks opened across the human fleet. Marines in powered armor launched into vacuum, carrying weapons designed for zero-gravity combat. They engaged the Devourers in three-dimensional melee that would have been impossible for most species. Sergeant Rivers led her squad across the hull of the TDF Valiant, magnetic boots securing them while they fired into attacking organisms. The Devourers were fast, adaptive, terrifying, but Rivers and her Marines were persistent, trained, and absolutely refused to quit. Third wave incoming, a sensor officer shouted. More Devourers poured from deeper in the nebula. Thousands more. The defensive fleet was being overwhelmed through sheer numbers. Torres made the hardest decision of her career. All ships fall back to secondary positions. We can't hold the outer line. The fleet began an organized retreat, human ships providing covering fire while the newer Allied vessels withdrew. They'd held the Devourers for 2 hours, destroying thousands of organisms. But the swarm kept coming. At the secondary defensive line, fortified platforms and additional forces waited. But Torres knew the truth. They were delaying the inevitable, buying time for evacuations deeper in galactic space. Then Dr. Wren made a discovery. Admiral Torres, she transmitted urgently. I'm detecting a pattern in the Devourer movements. They're coordinated by the largest organisms, but the coordination uses a specific electromagnetic frequency. Can we disrupt it? Possibly. If we could access the precursor beacon network, we could broadcast a counter frequency. The precursors must have used something similar to defeat them before. Torres checked her tactical display. The beacon hub was located deep in Devourer-controlled space, 3 systems away. We'd need to reach the hub station. That's a suicide mission. Then I volunteer, Dr. Wren said. This started because I activated that beacon. Let me finish it. Captain Reed, commanding the TDF Prometheus nearby, joined the channel. She's not going alone. I'll take a strike force. We can punch through. Torres wanted to refuse, wanted to find another way, but there wasn't another way. Approved. You have 12 hours. After that, we won't be able to hold the line. Reed assembled his strike force quickly. 6 human ships, 2 Luminari vessels including Dr. Wren's, a Quellan frigate, a Pelthrian cruiser, volunteers who understood they might not return. They punched through the Devourer swarm with pure aggression, their ships taking terrible damage but refusing to stop. Organisms swarmed them, clawed at them, tried to drag them down. The strike force left a trail of destroyed Devourers and their own debris. Hub station in sight, Reed reported. The ancient precursor structure hung in space, massive and dormant for millions of years. The Devourers had surrounded it, perhaps instinctively understanding its importance. The strike force fought through them with suicidal determination. The Quellan frigate exploded, buying time for the others. The Pelthrian cruiser lost atmosphere and power but kept firing until its weapons went cold. Reed's ship docked with the hub station. Marines secured the entrance while Dr. Wren rushed inside with human engineers. The station's technology was ancient, barely functional but still operational. I need 10 minutes, Dr. Wren said, her tendrils flying across alien interfaces. You've got 5, Reed replied, watching sensors. More Devourers were converging. His Marines formed a defensive perimeter, knowing they were the last line. Outside, Sergeant Rivers and her squad held the docking corridor. Devourers threw themselves at the Marines with mindless hunger. One by one, the Marines fell. Rivers herself took wounds that would have killed most species, but she kept fighting with grim determination. Doctor, whatever you're doing, do it faster, Reed transmitted. Almost there. The system is responding. The hub station blazed with light. Ancient technology activated after millions of years of silence. The beacon network came online. Thousands of warning beacons across the galaxy suddenly broadcasting a coordinated signal. The harmonic frequency washed through space. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and catastrophic. Their coordination shattered. Individual organisms thrashed in confusion, attacking each other, losing the hive intelligence that made them so dangerous. At the Threshold Nebula, Torres watched in amazement as the Devourer swarm dissolved into chaos. All ships advance. Hit them while they're vulnerable. The fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Confused Devourers died in thousands, unable to coordinate defenses or retreat. The organisms that had nearly overwhelmed galactic civilization became suddenly just animals, dangerous but manageable. Over the following weeks, human forces and their allies systematically hunted the scattered Devourers. It was brutal work, clearing system after system of organisms that still fought with individual ferocity. But without their hive coordination, they could be defeated. The strike force that reached the hub didn't all return. 4 ships survived the journey back. Captain Reed brought his damaged vessel home with half his crew dead. Sergeant Rivers survived but would never fight again, her injuries too severe even for human resilience. Dr. Wren returned as a hero, though she rejected the title. I only fixed what I accidentally broke, she insisted. The Galactic Council convened in what they were already calling the New Chamber, built to accommodate military representatives alongside civilian leadership. The old council structure had collapsed under the weight of war. Ambassador Lith, promoted to council arbiter, addressed the assembled delegates. We survived extinction because we learned to fight, because one species from a death world answered a distress call and taught us what we'd forgotten. The age of helpless peace is over. We must build a future where we're strong enough to protect what we value. Admiral Torres stood before the council, tired but unbowed. The Deathworld Doctrine, that's what they're calling our training program. Earth will provide military advisors indefinitely. We'll share our technology, our experience, our knowledge of warfare. But we won't fight your battles for you. You need to build your own strength. And if we become too warlike, a Pelthrian scholar asked. If we become like you? Taurus smiled faintly. We're not warlike, Doctor. We're survivors. There's a difference. We fight when we must, but we prefer peace. The goal isn't to make you aggressive. It's to make you capable. The Luminari delegation, now including several military officers who hadn't existed 6 months ago, stood in support. The galaxy was changing. War Chief Draxus surprisingly attended the council. Humanity had released him after the battle, and he'd chosen to remain. He addressed the chamber with unusual humility. The Scarvan Dominion formally requests membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition. We have experience with military organization. We can contribute to training, to fleet operations, to defense. We choose to use our strength to protect rather than conquer. The request was approved, former enemies becoming allies because survival required it. Months passed. The galaxy rebuilt. Human engineers helped design new warships that combined alien technology with human military principles. Training facilities opened on 50 worlds. Species that had never held weapons now had armed forces. The Devourer threat wasn't entirely eliminated. Small pockets remained in the deep quarantine zones, but they were contained, monitored, manageable. Dr. Wren returned to Ethros IV to find her homeworld transformed. Orbital defense platforms, military academies. Her people had changed, become harder, more dangerous, but also more confident, more secure. Captain Reed visited her at the research facility where it all began. The precursor beacon sat in a secure vault now, its secrets fully decoded. Do you regret it? Reed asked. Sending that distress call? Everything that followed? Dr. Wren looked at her world, at the ships in orbit, at Luminari soldiers training in the distance. 2,000 humans died protecting us, thousands more from other species. So much changed, so much was lost. That doesn't answer my question. No, Dr. Wren said finally. I don't regret it. We were helpless before, now we can defend ourselves. We learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the strength to prevent conflict and the courage to fight when you must. Reed nodded, understanding. The galaxy called us Deathworlders like it was an insult. But you know what? We are Deathworlders. Earth made us strong because it tried to kill us. Now we're using that strength to protect those who haven't had to be strong. I'm okay with that. Will humanity stay involved in galactic affairs? We're not going anywhere. There are too many species that still need help. Too many threats out there. Besides, Reed smiled, we kind of like having friends. Far above, human ships patrolled alongside Luminari, Quellan, Vraxian, and dozens of other species. The fleet that had nearly broken at the threshold now formed the core of a new galactic military. Not perfect, not invincible, but ready. The distress call that had summoned the Deathworlders had changed everything. The galaxy had learned fear, learned strength, learned that sometimes survival required becoming dangerous. And in the depths of space, in the quiet monitoring stations watching the quarantine zones, sensors remained alert, because the Devourers had been beaten before and returned. The galaxy would be ready next time, because they'd learned from the best. From species that evolved where every day was survival. From Deathworlders who understood that the price of peace was eternal vigilance and the will to fight. The galaxy no longer trembled at the thought of war. They were ready for it. And that readiness, paradoxically, made peace more likely than ever before. The humans had taught them well.